Hello. Thank you all for coming. I'm actually surprised by the number of you. That's exciting that you all want to hear what I have to say. Um, okay. I don't know how to work technology, but I'm good with animals, I promise. Um, I have a PowerPoint that I'll go through. It's nothing formal, so we'll have room for questions at the end, but if you guys have questions along the way, feel free to stop me. It can get a little bit, it's a lot of information, so I'm happy to go through things as we go along. Like Vicki said, my name is Perry. I'm the animal warden here. I've been here since October of 2023, and surprisingly, I don't think a lot of people know that the position has been filled, so hopefully this is a way to kind of get that out there that I'm here to help. I'm happy to help, and I would like to do whatever I can to kind of make the community better, both for the residents and for the people. So briefly about me, a little bit about my background. I went to the University of Illinois down in Champaign. I majored in animal sciences. I had no idea what I wanted to do with that degree. I just knew that I wanted to do something with animals, and along the way, I learned about animal control. My first job out of college was a kennel technician up at Lake County Animal Control, and then I became an officer there. And I've kind of bounced around from places between then and now. I've worked at a shelter that functioned similar here as like a holding facility for animal controls, but they weren't going out doing the field services themselves. So basically here, just out in Oak Park. I only have one dog. That surprises everybody that I only have one pet. That's him in the corner. His name is Gino. He's the best boy. And my favorite animal is a cow. I don't know, felt appropriate. I just liked this quote from the National Animal Care and Control Association about what animal control is. I think that overall the field gets kind of a negative look on it, especially if you look back at like old cartoons about the dog catcher picking up people's pets and taking them to the pound. Unfortunately, that was kind of how it was way back when, but we have changed the field, and we're also trying to change the image of the field with that now. So we're making progress, but there's always room for improvement. So the quote just says, animal control is a program that effectively treats the symptoms while seeking to eliminate the causes by compassionately using the tools of education and enforcement. So for example, you think about like a stray animal. My job is not only to, one, secure the animal safely and ideally find its home, but also address, how come it got out. It was a hole in the fence? Is the owner just letting it outside and not watching it? And then what can I do to prevent that from happening again? So it's not just catch the dog, that's the end of the day. There's a lot of things that then follow that. And part of that, is things like this, where I'm building a relationship with the community to show I'm not that scary. I do wear a uniform, but I'm not like the bad guy here to cite you for everything wrong that you do. Sometimes it's as simple as a conversation and educating somebody. So I just like that quote. I also wanted to touch briefly, before I go on, just so everyone knows, all of the pictures in here are animals that I've had some sort of contact with along the way. Just thought that they were fun to throw along. That's a little puppy that was picked up as a stray, and if you see her back leg is super straight, she broke her hip, so that's why she lays like that. She had surgery, she's fine, but she's just cute. I wanted to touch very, very briefly, because this will get very confusing if we go too deep into it, but just the laws that kind of guide what I can or can't do in my position. I'm a civilian officer for the city of Evanston, so I don't have like the power of arrest. I don't carry a gun. I don't have the capability to criminally charge anybody. If anything were to get to a point where it's like a misdemeanor or a felony, I'm going to be working with the police officers directly, mostly the detectives, and they're going to be the ones who are pursuing those charges with the state's attorney. I'm a tool and I work side by side with them, but they're the ones doing that. In my role, I'm only writing like city ordinance violations and things like that. But the Illinois Animal Control Act is the main thing that gives animal control officers the power to do what we do. So we can investigate complaints. We follow up on rabies vaccinations, apprehending stray animals, things like that. Animal bites, dog determinations. So that's just kind of the logistic part of it. The Humane Care for Animals Act is what you guys are most people probably think of, which is like pets need shelter, they need veterinary care, they need food, they need water, things like that. That's in the Humane Care for Animals Act. Cruel treatment is going to be one of those things that I would involve like a police officer. Those are going to be some more of the criminal charges. And then wildlife code, generally speaking, native wildlife is protected. So the state oversees all of the laws pertaining to wildlife, and then they set guidelines that someone like me can go then and interact with them and get involved when I need to. Important. Not saying that anyone here has done it, but sometimes people call and they say like, oh, I brought this squirrel into my house. If you are not licensed to do that, you cannot do that, and the wildlife code is the one that gives you that. So you can, as a civilian, go and like get a license to do that through the Department of Natural Resources, but without that, technically you're breaking the law, but I won't say anything. And then euthanasia guidelines, there are just, anyone who is performing euthanasia, you have to be certified. There are means that we have to do that so that we are humane in that action. And then obviously the City of Evanston Municipal Code is what is really going to guide me here as far as like nuisance complaints. So barking, running at large, number of dogs, licensing, things like that, that are just specific to Evanston. Okay, so we'll go through a little bit of the types of calls for service that I respond to, and then there's just some fun pictures along the way. So these are probably the top 3, I would say. I don't have specific numbers, I'm sorry. In our system, they're all just under animal complaints. Stray animals would probably be the top one, though. And stray animals, dogs, cats, anything that somebody could own as a pet. We don't have it so much here, but also livestock could be considered a stray animal. So, chickens, ducks, goats, things like that. Animal bites. Anytime an animal breaks contact with another mammal specifically, it does have to be reported to Cook County. Again, I won't go into all of the details of it because it gets very confusing and nobody needs to hear all of that. But that is how rabies could be transmitted. So that's why it has to get reported. And then the offending animal has to do what's called a rabies observation. That's no fun, but it's fine. And then nuisance complaint, barking dogs. If you have a neighbor who, running at large is like if you have a neighbor who lets their dog out and just kind of lets it do its thing and then come back. Versus dogs off leash are going to be like, I get a lot of calls at parks for like groups of people who go and let all of their dogs off leash and play there, which sounds fun, but can cause a lot of problems for everyone else in the area. These are some of the dogs. Actually, all of them have come through here. Keeler was a shelter dog that got adopted and then ended up at the police station. And I said, I know you. You're not supposed to be here. Yes.
Have you seen a dog with rabies, and what does that look like?
So the last time that the state of Illinois has had, I guess it's kind of a two-part. The last time a dog that resided in Cook County had rabies was prior to 1964. If I'm not mistaken, the most recent one was Lake County, and I'm going to have my years wrong there, but the dog came, it was in like 2019, maybe 2021, but the dog came from Azerbaijan, and while it was doing its confinement here, when dogs or animals come in from another country, they have to do like a holding to make sure that they're healthy, and during that time, it was discovered that she had rabies, so unfortunately, she was euthanized. Personally, I've never seen an animal, like, where I was like, oh, you have rabies. Yeah.
That's what they say about raccoons.
Yeah, raccoons, from my understanding, most of the time they have what's called distemper, and it presents similarly to rabies. So they get, like, crusty eyes, nose gunk, and they kind of wobble like they're drunk. But from my understanding, most of the time that's distemper and not rabies. The Department of Public Health is not testing for rabies unless there's known exposure too. So just like if an animal's sick and we pick it up and it's euthanized, we're not going to find out what it has necessarily unless there was some sort of contact with a human or another domestic animal where it could then be spread. Yes, I have it. You're getting ahead of me. So again, I just wanted to point out some fun, like I think typically when people think of stray animals, they think of dogs and cats, which most of the time it is. Um, but even if it is a dog or a cat, it could also just be, I never really know what kind of situation I'm going out into. The top left corner, Tanya was actually there with me. This dog was growling at us and wanted nothing to do with us, and I opened my truck door, and then she jumped in and then was still growling at us, and I was like, great, now what? um, she was just scared. She went home that day, I think. Yeah, so, she was just spooked. Next to her is Gus, who also came from the shelter. Tanya also was part of that too. I had gotten a call about him, and he just took off on me. I mean, there was no way he was going to let me get close, and eventually I lost sight of him, and 2 or 3 months later, Tanya called me, and he was in the park here, and we found out that he was living up on Mount Trashmore, so set a trap, and 2 days later, Tanya brought him back here. He's since been adopted. We don't know. Yeah, we didn't know. We don't know if somebody was like throwing food out there for him. He made it. Yeah, he wasn't in terrible shape, so we think he was getting food from somewhere, but yeah, I lost sight of him up by like Harbert Park along the canal, so I was thinking maybe by the canal, but kind of one of those things you wish they could talk and tell us their stories. Next to him is a rabbit I caught in an alley in the rain. The neighbors thought I was crazy, but she also went home too, didn't she? Yeah, wow, look at us go. And then like hamsters, they weren't necessarily strays, they were left in a shoebox, but that is part of the things that I would get. Again, just some other ones along my careers. More dogs hit by cars, unfortunately. So even, just again, you go out for a dog and it can turn into something much bigger. Other calls for service. These are going to be ones that are not necessarily like my day-to-day, but they do come up. Check conditions. I have a little asterisk there because sometimes people call and they think that something is going on next door that isn't going on, so it comes in as like an animal cruelty complaint or some like a check conditions, and it's just kind of misinformation. Every time you look outside, your neighbor's dog is outside, so the dog must live outside, and you don't see shelter and you don't see food and water, when in reality it's just every time you happen to look outside, the dog's outside. But these are going to be the ones most of the times that then turn into like a possible cruelty situation. Another little asterisk there, when we get to the next slide, I'll explain why, just some more about cruelty too. I also help the fire department and our police officers in situations where an owner has passed away or is hospitalized or arrested. Any situation where they can't find a next of kin or a friend or a neighbor or somebody who can take care of the animal right away, I'm going to respond and take the animal. We'll bring it here, at least for safekeeping, and we can kind of figure out the plan moving forward. Same things with evictions. If Cook County's responding, they're usually hopefully going to give me a heads up that they're coming. And if, again, no friends, no family, the owner doesn't have a place to take the animals right away, we can at least get them here for safekeeping for the time being. And then search warrants, that doesn't happen very often, but again, if our police officers are executing a search warrant and there's dogs in the house, and they don't know what they're walking into, I get to be the one to make sure that they're safe with those animals. So just something about these pictures. That top left-hand corner ended up being a cruelty case that I had up in Lake County, but it actually didn't start as anything. It started as a check well being on the person because the neighbor noticed a funny smell coming from the house, from the townhouse. Turns out there are 56 cats living there. So, the police responded thinking they were checking on the person, got in the house, deemed it uninhabitable, and we got to pull all of those cats. The little dog next to them, unfortunately, his owner passed away. So when the sheriff responded and found the owner, they couldn't find a next of kin, at least locally. So took the dog in for safekeeping. I believe it was the son that came a few days later and got the dog eventually. But again, just in the time being, making sure they're safe. This little hamster and then things like that snake and that bearded dragon are going to be mostly things that you see in like an eviction or an arrest or things like that. They're not typically going to be like my stray animal calls. Those are usually when things that we're finding directly in somebody's house. Again, just no one to take care of at the time. Going back to the cruelty too, I just wanted to point out all of the 4 on the bottom and this cat up top, all of them came in as strays looking like that. So again, not because somebody called and said, I'm concerned about this animal. They got out for one reason or another. They were dumped, who knows, but ended up with us. And then, they're in that condition. The only one that ever anything came out of is this little girl. She was the only one we ever found an owner for. But she was ended up being relinquished and went to a rescue and lived out the rest of her life in a nice comfy home. And then the little girl on the top left, she was another cruelty case. That again was not because the police weren't there initially for the animals. They showed up for, I don't remember exactly what it was, but got there, and her and another dog were left in a house by themselves, and there were 2 deceased dogs outside. So we got her and her housemate, and they both were relinquished, and but I just thought it was interesting to point out that most cruelty cases, come from something other than, calling on your neighbor. I think ideally, or generally speaking, people aren't going to be advertising that they're mistreating their animals. So I guess it's sort of happenstance that we come into these situations where we can then help them. Wildlife. So again, going back to wildlife code, these are all little guys from Evanston. So they've all made their way through the town at some point. Going back to wildlife code, generally speaking, native wildlife is protected. So if it lives here, I cannot intervene just because somebody thinks that it's annoying, or they don't want it in their yard. If it's healthy and it's not causing like monetary property damage or acting aggressively towards people, you just got to leave it alone. The only time that changes is if it's in the living quarters or there's known exposure and it is a potential rabies risk to a human. So living quarters, if they're, you come home one day and there's a bat, it's usually a bat, in your house, you get to call me, I get to come out and get the bat out. If we can verify that there was no contact with anybody who lives in the house or any pets in the house, then the animal is going to be released on scene. If there is a potential exposure, that's when we have to look into rabies testing and, determine what the exposure is and whether or not that animal has to be tested. And then if they're sick or injured. So all of these guys were injured, I guess, sick. And I work with Flint Creek Wildlife up in Barrington. They take all of my little friends and nurse them back to health and then release them back into Evanston. So they've all been, I believe they've all made a full recovery as of today and have been returned. So just some more fun wildlife calls. That coyote up at the top, the whole top row is from Evanston. That coyote up at the top, he was hit by one of the L trains and found on the tracks. The conductor thought that he killed him. And when they had their company come out to dispose of the body, they realized he was still alive. Luckily, the conductor saw him and was able to slow down at least enough. He has since made a full recovery and was re-released back up north. So he was good. Yeah. The beaver up on top, I got a call up by Northwestern's campus. They were doing construction up there, and they came back after a long weekend and noticed that a lot of their wood had been chewed on. Turns out he had fallen like 30 feet down and just couldn't get back up. So I wish I should have put the video of him in there. That would have been fun. We got him into a crate, and then he got to be airlifted out by the crane. And then he spent a night at the shelter. I think that might have been the first crazy wildlife I brought you guys. Yeah. The turkey was found in a parking garage downtown Evanston. I don't know why he was there. I don't know where he came from. He's a wild turkey, so it's not like somebody had him as a pet. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was just as confused as I was. And then, yeah, just, again, I'm sure everyone has seen it along the way, but don't try this at home. I am a professional, as they say. I don't know. I guess I don't remember everyone's story there, but a lot of times too, so like those little baby bunnies, I didn't actually do anything with them. Somebody had called, they found the bunny nest and they were just worried about it. So I just went out there and talked to them about it. I just wanted to include that picture because sometimes that's all it is. You know, I get out there, the babies were healthy. They were recently fed. The nest wasn't like ruined. So that told me that mom was still taking care of them. So there was no reason for me to take them at that time. You know, we talked about, if you don't see mom over the next day, I'll come back and then I'll take them. But she was taking good care of them. She was doing what she needed to do.
What happened in the city yesterday?
Oh, yes, I did.
800 North Halsted,
Yeah.
Burrowed into frozen foods, and they the animal people were pulling this coyote out.
Yeah.
With its tail.
Yeah.
It was way in there.
Yeah. That coyote actually also went to Flint Creek. So they made a post today that he's doing fine. I think he's just shocked and confused. Sorry, what? The fox? So sorry, I don't remember. A lot of the ones on the bottom are from my days at Lake County, and my memory's not that good. The swan at the bottom I know was, its feet got frozen in a lake. So from the shore, I used like a catch pole to break the ice and then pick him up with a net. And then he also just went to Flint Creek. I think this heron probably had a broken wing or a broken leg. This was a coyote pup. I'm not sure what was wrong with it. It was just laying in the grass, not doing anything. So I was like, hey, can you guys take a look at this? This picture here at the corner, at the bottom, it's kind of hard to see, but it's a mom bird whose baby had fallen out of the nest. And while she was trying to go down and like take care of it, her foot got caught in some twine. So she's hanging up, like dangling from her nest, just watching her, little newborn baby on the ground. They were reunited. Baby was returned to nest and mom was back up. That little baby raccoon, I tried to reunite him with mom. Mom never came back for him, so he also went to a rehabber. And then that little baby duck was part of a group of like 6 or 7 that fell down into a sewer drain. And I got to rescue them from there, which was fun. And then bats. Again, I'm not really interacting with bats unless they're in somebody's home. That's really the only time that there's a need for me to be there. I don't remember exactly where that one came from, but he was from Evanston. And then a big part of my job is collaboration. So I just wanted to shout out some of the places I do work with. Obviously here, all of my strays. Are you laughing at the? Down at the bottom, that's Dawn. She runs Flint Creek. She's great. So that's where most of my wildlife goes. If I have an animal that needs like immediate medical attention that I don't think can wait overnight, so I do bring wildlife here. They got a cool wildlife room. If I don't think that they can wait overnight, I'll bring them to Chicago Exotics. They're also great. They'll take really anything. I work with the Evanston Health Department in regards to the rabies exposure and the rabies risk. They have their own procedures where they'll talk to people who if a bat has been found in their home and run through some questions on determine whether or not they think they need the post-exposure prophylaxis for rabies. Occasionally I work with Cook County Animal Control and the Department of Natural Resources. And then, always good to keep past employers, coworkers, things like that in your pocket. That top picture was a dog that was, I think his owner passed away if I'm not mistaken, and he was an older German Shepherd, and he had I forget what it's called when it affects their hips. Yeah. Oh, look at you guys. Yeah, he had that. So he went down to a rescue down in Champaign, and that gentleman is Ken. I worked for him in college, and he covered the entire cost of his wheelchair. So that is Rambo meeting him, saying thank you. So that's just a fun little story. Okay, quickly, who to call? I think sometimes people aren't sure who to call here. There's a lot of ways you can reach me. For general questions or concerns, Evanston 311, they'll put in a service request. It'll go to me. We can chat. We can work through whatever we need to. I like to use that for like nuisance complaints. So if you have a neighbor who's always letting their dog out and barking, a neighbor who's maybe not picking up after their dog, things like that. Things that don't need to be responded to right away, but we can have more of a conversation about, kind of go over our options. Check conditions. I have a little asterisk there because depending on the severity, if it's something like you think your neighbor has maybe more cats than they're able to take care of, that could go through 311. If it's something like, hey, my neighbor's dog has been outside for 3 days, I'm concerned, that's probably something that should go through the police non-emergency line. So again, just depending on the severity, if we need a more immediate response. So Evanston 311 is going to be low level. We don't need to get to it right away. We can talk about it. We can go through options. Maybe you just have a question or you need like guidelines or guidance or referrals for something. That would be 311. Non-emergency and this is 24/7 too. So even when I'm not here, police officers will respond. Police non-emergency, this is going to be things that are not an emergency but do need a quick response. So a stray animal, an animal bite, because we do have to make a report for that. Again, I have an asterisk there because if we go down to the emergency, like if the animal is a loose dog that's biting people, that's something we need to respond to right away. If it's your dog and another dog got in the fight at a dog park and you have the owner's information and everyone's separated and gone their ways, that's not an emergency. We don't need to take up 911's time. I really don't like to tell people to call 911 to get a hold of me unless it's an actual emergency, just so we're keeping the lines clear. So dogs off leash too, again, we need a quick response. Barking dog, check conditions. The owner passed away and stuff. I get it occasionally. I get calls from citizens here for that, or I would say mostly you guys too, if they're aware of somebody who has a pet and has been hospitalized or something. They can always call and just say, hey, I don't know if you've gotten this animal. I think that's more important that we go through the non-emergency line versus 311, because if the animal is still in this home and it's been in there for X amount of days with no care, like that's something we should address right away. Most of the time though, if like the police are responding to those, they're going to be the ones to call me. I just have that up there in case it ever comes across that a citizen needed to call. And then wildlife in the living quarters, known exposure, things like that, again, through the non-emergency line. And then other numbers that people can call, the health department, if you aren't sure whether or not you need post-exposure, they're going to be the ones to answer those questions for you. I cannot give medical advice. I will just direct you to them anyways. Cook County Animal and Rabies Control, they have on-call officers all the time that respond for emergencies only. So if I'm not here, they're not going to respond to like a stray dog. That's going to be something that our officers will eventually respond to if they have the means to do so, at the time. If they're all dealing with an emergency, that it is going to be put on later on the list, but they'll get to it eventually. But Cook County is just a good number to have for people to have if there's an emergency after hours, on the holidays, on weekends, things like that. And then I also included Flint Creek's number there because they will take directly from the public. So the police officers are not always going to respond to wildlife calls. A lot of them don't have experience doing so, or don't feel comfortable doing so, which is fine. I don't want them to be in a position where they're going to put themselves at risk or the animal or the citizen at risk. So if it's something, like I've had people where they find like a bird and they can put it into a box. I've had people put squirrels into boxes too. It's not recommended, but people will do it. But Flint Creek will take directly from the public. You just have to call them first. It is a bit of a drive up to Barrington, but I just think it's important that people know, if I'm not here and they want the animal to get help as soon as possible, that is an option. Oh, yes. They will not do it either. Yeah. I know that there are a few officers who have experience dealing with wildlife, and I think the biggest thing too is they have their rabies vaccine, so they're a little bit more comfortable putting themselves in that position. If our officers don't have that rabies vaccine and they have no experience dealing with wildlife, I'm not going to recommend that they do that anyways. Which also would go back to Cook County. So, like, if there's a wild animal in your home and our officers can't help, Cook County will send an officer to respond. That constitutes as an emergency for them. I don't know really in what other regards you would need to call Cook County if that our officers wouldn't respond to as well. It's really only going to be like wildlife in the home or potential exposure like that. Did everyone who wanted a picture get that? Okay. That's all I have, and my little friend the pig.